Michael, I put Orange Bowl on the lower. My oh my, are we going to have some fun today? Hello, everybody. It's Brandon Adams, DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Terrence Edwards later on, preview of the Peach Bowl with him. Before that, though, a lot of a deep dive look at the loss in embarrassing fashion. You hate to see it for those lousy, stinking Gators, and the litany of excuses that came the way of Dan Mullen after the game was over. Very interesting contrast with how Florida handled its business last night compared to how Georgia has handled its business in the past. And spoiler alert, I think the Georgia comparison leads the Dogs looking pretty favorable there on that. We'll hear more from Todd Mungan on today's show. A little bit of a look at JT Daniels and his feeling on the Dogs and himself as the season gets ready to come to a close. We'll preview a relatively light slate of bowl games for today as well, and generally speaking, wish you all a happy new year before we're done. Good to have you with us. This is going to be a fun one. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Brief confession just for a moment at the top of the show. A lot of you know what's been going on in my life the last couple of weeks, and I think a lot of you kind of understand the therapeutic nature for me for returning to work. I love doing the show. I love getting a chance to speak to each of you. This is a passion project for me, more so than just a way to earn a living. It has been great to be back doing the show again. There is, however, one thing that I am not quite ready to do yet, which from time to time I typically enjoy doing. I don't quite have the stamina yet to get on Twitter and start, joking around and poking fun at Dan Mullen, the lousy, stinking Florida Gators, the way that I might from time to time. I'm just not quite ready to do that as of yet. I don't know when I will be, but as of yet, Twitter jokes just aren't quite my thing for now. I'm sure you can probably understand that. However, I will say, boy, did I enjoy watching all of you do this last night. The fun that Georgia fans were having as Florida was getting just absolutely stepped on, one play after the next by Oklahoma, a dominant Cotton Bowl win for the Sooners there against the Gators. I loved all of it, and trust me, in normal times, I'd have been right there with you, tweeting everything that you were tweeting and favoriting and liking all the stuff that you're putting out there. It was just a really good thing all the way around. I apologize for doing this video only for a moment because I like to make the show very accessible for radio podcasts, but I do have to show you this one picture. For all the folks who kind of, got all over Mullen and the Gators for everything that went down, I think there's one thing that I don't think quite has gotten enough play as of yet. Before the game, the Cotton Bowl folks, and listen, we've seen Kirby Smart wear the leather helmet from the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl Kickoff Classic. We've seen all kinds of stuff that coaches have to do during bowl season, so Dan Mullen's certainly not the first, but Mullen was presented a cowboy hat as a part of being in the Cotton Bowl there, deep in the heart of Texas. I'm telling you, pound for pound, for those of you watching on video, and I apologize if you're radio podcast, you can't see this, pound for pound, this picture of Mullen trying to stand tall with this hat on is every bit as ridiculous as, remember the photo and the press conference he did where he was dressed like Darth Vader? The cowboy hat Mullen is every bit as ridiculous. You know the phrase, all hat, no cattle? I've never seen that phrase feel more come to life than it does with Dan Mullen right there. Just an embarrassing performance from him before the game to look like a goofball in the cowboy hat, and then obviously an embarrassing performance after the game with the way that his team had gotten beaten up badly by Oklahoma, and then just, I'm talking about one excuse after another by Mullen for the way that his team had played. Here's what I'm going to do. You have jobs, you have to work, you probably went to bed early, many of you did anyway. You don't get a chance to chronicle everything that goes on during a game that starts relatively late, and certainly the post-game press conference that happens even later than that. That is what I'm here to do. This is the service that I provide for you even on New Year's Eve. I took the time of watching and listening to the entire Dan Mullen post-game press conference so you wouldn't have to, and I've taken all the juicy morsels of Mullen excusing away or attempting to excuse away the loss that his team suffered to Oklahoma. I have put them all together in one handy package for you to enjoy. Listen to the whining, the belly aching, the moaning, the groaning, and the outright refusal to accept the reality that Oklahoma had fed it to Florida last night. This is Dan Mullen at his worst, or as we would say around here, his best, because we revel in every minute of this. Listen to about 45 seconds or so of Dan Mullen's excuses.
A lot of the guys that were out there playing tonight were on the scout team most of the year for us, so we kept things simple. Haven't really had the chance to play within the normal game plan week. You know, we were under numbers, actually. I mean, to be honest with you, I guess we could have said I give our guys credit. We had the numbers to not play the game. I mean, you see a lot of games have been canceled and not played. But I would have loved to have played the season we were supposed to play with the team we were supposed to have. But unfortunately for COVID, we weren't able to do that. Maybe this is wrong. I viewed this game that wasn't the 2020 football team that you saw. I mean, there are about 25 guys missing off the 2020 football team out there tonight. That was kind of like a kickstart for us for the future. No, that's how I kind of view this game. Not really. I view the last game. You know, the last team the 2020 team played was 11 days ago.
By the way, how much are we enjoying this Cotton Bowl loss for Florida? Our video staff, led by Michael Carvel here, fresh video package from the Cotton Bowl last night. We were up late last night putting these highlights together of Oklahoma dominating Florida, so good job by Michael Carvel on that front. Once again, for those of you watching on video, their little inside baseball for you on that. But how about the excuses from Mullen? Oh, these guys are in the scout team. We could have not even played the game. We had the numbers low enough where we didn't have to. The one that takes the cake for me, Mullen, who has the audacity to say, and trust me, there's a word I'd like to use in place of audacity, but I'm too much of a gentleman to do so. Mullen, who has the audacity to say, gosh, if it wasn't for COVID, imagine the team we could have fielded. How dare you go out and say that, knowing everything that happened for you this season? And listen, the one thing you have never heard me say on this show, because I just don't do stuff like this, winners are not whiners. I don't spend a bunch of time whining about the fact that, Georgia's schedule got upended because of a coronavirus outbreak for Florida. We don't do that. I pretty much try to treat my life the same way I tell my kids to treat theirs. You get what you get. You don't pitch a fit. And that's kind of the way that I sort of approach everything in life, college football included. The fact that Georgia's bye week got moved around, and the fact that Georgia had to kind of do some things differently because of something that was out of their own control, what happened at Florida, we haven't whined about that. But then Mullen wants to say, gosh, can you imagine the team we would have if it wasn't for a coronavirus? Well, listen, the door would be open for a lot of teams to say a lot of stuff if that's going to be the way that all this is going to be talked about, obviously Georgia included, and we've certainly chronicled some of that with what Todd Monken was asked during his press conference this week. But can you imagine, once again, the gentlemanly word here, the audacity of Dan Mullen to say, man, if it wasn't for coronavirus, imagine the team we'd be able to put together. And then ultimately the coup de grace for him to say, the last game of the 2020 season for us was 11 days ago. What if you're a Cotton Bowl executive? Can you imagine what it must sound like in your ears to hear that? Or ESPN, who pays big money to broadcast a game like this, to hear Dan Mullen essentially saying the quiet part out loud of, we didn't even think this was a real game. This is how much we're going to try to sidestep responsibility for what happened in the Cotton Bowl. Our last game of the season was actually 11 days ago. This was just whatever else, a spring game tune-up of the 2021 season. Imagine the people who have so much financially invested in the bowl games to hear Mullen trying to sidestep responsibility like that. Frankly, I think it's gross and unbecoming of someone who wants to be treated presumably as a serious, high-minded leader of men, as a head coach in the the SEC, I don't think Dan Mullen comes across looking very astute there in that regard. And I think it is a very fair comparison to the way that Georgia has handled some of this kind of stuff in the past, because Georgia also has a loss on its bowl resume recently that it wasn't proud of, and that was only by 7 points to Texas. This was, 55-20 at the hands of Oklahoma, so the nature of the losses was different. But the one thing you did not hear much from Kirby after Georgia lost to Texas a couple of years ago, any kind of excuses about the game not mattering. If anything, Georgia made that a rallying cry to try to get better in the future. And then going into last year's Sugar Bowl, taking it a step further, the idea that somehow the opt-outs excuse your performance, or the idea that somehow the game itself doesn't count on the resume because it's so late in the process. We just heard Dan Mullen say, no, the last game of the season for us 11 days ago, we could have not even shown up to play this game. We had walk-on guys, excuse. Contrast that to the very serious nature of Kirby Smart's words, talking about last year's version of the Sugar Bowl. If you want to talk about the future of the program, which program's on better foundation and footing going forward, I think you'd choose the program where the coach talks like this. Listen to this.
To be honest with you, the future's only bright if those guys continue to work, because there's a disease and that creeps in at Georgia where kids believe they're better than they are, and they read their own press clippings. And our team chaplain did a wonderful job today expressing that in a verse, and I can't quote the verse. Jake probably can, but he basically said that when you start reading about yourself and believing your own press clippings is when you start to fall. And those kids that you just mentioned are tremendous players, but they'll only be as good as they can be if they stay as hungry as they are. And when you're not hungry, you become average. And some of that, I think, has affected us in the past. And we've got to find a way in this program to not let that creep in and keep that same hunger you have as a young player, because we've had it happen to several guys that were really hungry and then they become full. And you can't become full when you go play in the teams we play against.
I love that from Smart. I think that's real talk. I think it's tough talk, and I think it's the kind of thing that can set the foundation of the future. Now, let me also say this to be fair and balanced for a moment, because we have a lot of Florida fans who like to watch the show. Sometimes it's a hate watch. Sometimes it's a little different than that. I have great respect for them. Many of them reach out to me from time to time, and I enjoy the back and forth kind of stuff that we have. Here's the one thing I will acknowledge for the Florida fans who communicate with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. It is obviously true that the Gators have scoreboard over Georgia from right now. The game took place in Jacksonville. Florida won it, and begrudgingly, I have to give the Gators credit for that. But as we said earlier this week, the college football is not a finite game. It is a continuous, endless game, infinite game, year after year after year, where you're not just trying to have a good team, you're trying to build a great program. And part of how you build a program is how you talk about your goals and objectives. Not excusing away losses, but using every moment that happens, even bowl games, which Kirby Smart just said counts on the resume. It matters how you perform. The way in which you speak is how you help build up the program. I personally, as a Georgia fan, prefer the way that the Georgia coach talks about program building more so than the excuse-making that you just heard from Dan Mullen. And I do believe that mindset at UGA does give it a potential advantage on the Gators as both these teams try to move towards 2021. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Meriwether and Tharp. It's great to have you with us as well, no matter how you get to us today, on video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're back on the radio again today on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Hello to our friends in the Classic City, as always. And, of course, podcast-wise, there are so many different platforms this show is available on now. I'm really proud of all of them. Spotify, the Apple Player, the Google Player. A lot of you have all kinds of ways in which you enjoy listening to our program. We are platform agnostic around here. Whichever platform you prefer is the one we're glad to have available for you, and hopefully some new platforms to come here for 2021 as well. Big thanks to our friends at Meriwether and Tharp making it all possible. Just good folks over there, and they do a very important service. Now listen, I'll acknowledge it's not always the most fun thing to talk about, and a lot of times the holiday season heightens the anxiety when it comes to the potential of a divorce. I totally understand all of that, and I obviously have respect for those of you who are potential candidates for a divorce when I bring this up. But I have no hesitation in telling you this. If this is something that you're about to deal with, the way to make it as comfortable as possible for you and the way to set yourself up for a better future on the other end is to have a strong advocate on your side. That strength in the case of Meriwether and Tharp is born out of thousands and thousands of experiences of going through a process just like this. Your situation, of course, is, fact dependent, and you have, individual things that make your situation unique. I understand that, but Meriwether and Tharp has been through thousands of the divorce procedures in the past, and they want to put that institutional expertise for you. So here's what you need to do. You need to find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. Of course, Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. It is Terrence Edwards here coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And when Mike Griffith was on the show yesterday, I said something to him about listening to Todd Monken, the Georgia offensive coordinator, talk a little earlier this week, which was, to me, very refreshing. I thought it was very nice to hear a conversation from Monken, which I thought was tethered to reality. The fact is, Georgia for the last couple of years has been working to upgrade its offense. Now, that's not a finished product even right now, although Georgia has certainly played better offensively the last few weeks, clearly to close out the regular season. This is an offensive unit that appears to be getting better, but the process of being as good as the very best teams in the country, and admittedly even as good as what Florida has been a lot this season, that is still an ongoing process, and it's not an easy thing to do. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But we have been optimistic around here because we think some in the Mississippi State game, yes, even some in the South Carolina game, obviously a lot in the Missouri game, evidence of Georgia getting better seems to be taking place. But Monken still wants more, it would seem. And one thing in particular he was asked about. Now, he was asked about Darnell Washington. We'll probably do more on Washington as we head towards the offseason, but it's the second half of that answer that I want to highlight for you here on the notion of Washington as a potential playmaker, getting all of those playmakers involved for UGA. This is really good. A little more colorful language than we would typically do on the show, but we left it as is. Todd Monken talking about what needs to happen to get all the guys who want the ball for the Georgia offense. Here is the Georgia OC.
It is hard for our guys because there is really only one ball. So really good running backs, and I promise you if you ask them, they'd want more touches. And for a while there, everybody was on my ass about not getting it to George. And, then Jermaine makes some plays, and then everybody wants to throw it to Jermaine. And Kieras is doing great. So that's just part of what we do. You're just hopeful that you have enough skilled players to where they have to defend the whole field, and all the players that are on the field are capable of making plays, which I think is a sign of a really good offense. The best offenses have that in terms of weapons of tight ends, wideouts, and running backs, I think, which gives you the opportunity to take advantage of mismatches and make them defend the field.
Listen, I would never pretend that the kind of conversation we have on the show or that other Georgia fans have with each other is as informed and knowledgeable as the kind of conversation that Todd Monken has behind closed doors or in the Georgia football office. I would never pretend that, but I do think it's somewhat comforting as a fan to know that Monken is aware of the kinds of conversations that happen in places like this or wherever it is that Georgia fans get together. Why wasn't George Pickens at certain points of the year getting the ball more, or why isn't this guy getting the ball or that guy, whatever else? It's just kind of comforting to know that Monken is aware those discussions are taking place and is self-confident enough to acknowledge them, even though his understanding of the Georgia offense, what has happened, what will happen, is far more intricate than any of ours could ever hope to be. Even if you combined our knowledge together, it might not equal what Monken has about his own offense. But the self-awareness to say, yeah, people were on me because of Pickens not getting the ball and this, that, and the third, whatever else, there's just something about that that's really comforting. And obviously it's a big test for Georgia on Friday against Cincinnati because since JT Daniels has been the Georgia starting quarterback, this is the best defense Georgia will have played, at least on paper, by kind of a long shot. So punctuating the improvement against a better defense is one of the things that makes Friday really interesting. But when you think about, and it certainly seems like Monken's on his way back for 2021, you hope JT Daniels will be as well. We'll have more on that later on the show. But when you think about this, I think part of the way in which Georgia can continue to evolve and improve is the fact that Monken is willing to take on so many tough topics like that head on with very little attempt to sidestep them whatsoever. Pretty good stuff. We'll get Terrence Edwards on this topic in a moment. Before that, let me remind you, it's Around the Doghouse, delivered today by Marco's Pizza, America's most beloved pizza, real, authentic pizza, made the Italian way. Great savings as well at Marco's Pizza. You're getting ready to watch some football this weekend. Friday, of course, big day for football, or just hanging out with family and friends for the holiday tonight. How about this great deal right now? I've been telling you about those large specialty pizzas from Marco's, like the Deluxe, the Garden, or the All Meat. Well, you can get one of those and a two-topping pizza, a large two-topping pizza right now for just $23.99. That's great savings as we head towards New Year's Eve here. So maybe keep that in mind for tonight, either on the Marco's app or online at marcos.com. Speaking of JT Daniels, we'll have more on him before we're done on today's show. But for now, for more on Georgia's attempt to keep getting those playmakers involved and exactly what we can expect to see happen against Cincinnati, let's talk about all of that and more with my partner from the DawgNation postgame show, which will also take place tomorrow as well. Let's talk to former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Boy, it has been too long since I've gotten a chance to speak to the former Georgia wide receiver, a terrific analyst covering this sport, and a very good personal coach as well. Terrence Edwards does great work all around the landscape of football, really 12 months out of the year, and has been a tremendous partner and co-host on the DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore all season long as well. Terrence, welcome back here to DawgNation Daily presented by Merriweather and Tharp. It's great to get a chance to talk to you again. I'm glad to have you here and hope you had a great Christmas and are looking forward to a Happy New Year.
I did, B.A., and I'm kind of sad. It's been too long, and I'm happy to be back, ready to get rolling.
Well, thank you so much, Terrence. I appreciate that. And let me bring you in on what I was just discussing. We heard Todd Monken earlier this week acknowledge the fact that when you don't see George Pickens getting the football, Georgia fans want that to take place, wonder why it's not taking place. Darnell Washington, much the same way. He's a little bit different because he's developing as a freshman, but that's a guy that Monken was also willing to talk about very openly. To me, I take comfort. He mentioned Jermaine Burton by name, too, I guess. To me, Terrence, I take comfort when the offensive coordinator is that willing to acknowledge what fans and former players are also talking about, that there are these potential playmakers, and you got to find a way to feed them the football. That's still kind of a work in progress for Georgia on the field, but the fact that Monken's so willing to talk about it, I think, is potentially a sign that more improvement could be on the way. Do you agree with that?
I think so. I think when you have a coach and, he's no dummy, he's in a position because he's had a lot of success running offense, and he's seen a lot of great players, and he sees that he has a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and it's his job to get these guys the ball. And if I was the offense coordinator, I'd be very excited about the potential we have, especially on the outside and having a 6'7", 6'8" tight end.
Yeah, and especially in the case of Washington, you know, this is what we do. You know, we saw him more involved in the Missouri game. I wasn't able to be a part of that game, but we did see, that taking place. And, Georgia fans want more playmakers in the program, whether it's a guy like a Rick Gilbert eventually transferring or just anybody from the class of, 2022 or, whatever else you want to get to here. Part of the value of demonstrating that you can develop a Washington, get him involved, or continue to turn George Pickens into someone who maximizes his full potential is because you want other potential playmakers, whether they be transfers or just elite prospects from future recruiting classes. You want them to see what's going on at Georgia and say, if I go there, I can also do that too, right?
Right. I mean, just look at the success that Alabama has had just bringing in a receiver after receiver. It's because they put those guys in position to be very successful on the field and off the field. So Georgia, and Coach Monken really understands. So, playing the game is about winning and also recruiting. You got to show these recruits that you're going to be able to develop them as a player, one, and expose their potential on the field, too. So he understands what he has to do, and if you're doing that very well, that also comes along with winning. You're winning. So players want to be in winning programs, and players want to be in programs where their talent is going to be exploited.
I think that's exactly right. When you move on and talk about what's going to happen on Friday, first of all, as a former player, how different is this bowl situation going to be where you're really traveling in as if it was a road game? A lot of those pre-bowl festivities. Doesn't seem like they're really taking place at all, obviously with good reason because of the coronavirus epidemic that continues to be going on. Put yourself in the mind of these players who are not getting that typical bowl experience. How different is that going to be for them? Maybe it doesn't affect the way they play because they're used to playing road games, but certainly as someone like yourself who played in a lot of bowl games, this is definitely going to be a different kind of year, right?
I think so. Just for the older guys who actually understand what the bowl experience is about, going and visiting the Children's Hospital and going and just doing your local sightseeing and getting a bowl gift. It's very exciting. So these freshmen really don't understand. They're just thinking as a typical road game for them. But the upperclassmen is really going to miss that experience. And one big thing for me is just visiting the Children's Hospital. That was a very big thing that I love to do while in those 4 bowl games that we played in. So that's probably the biggest thing that the player's going to miss, just going out in the community and seeing those kids in the hospital.
How important do you think it is for Georgia to be able to kind of punctuate their season with a big win against a highly ranked team? There's some people that obviously don't view Cincinnati on the same caliber of the SEC, and I understand that, but this is a top 10 team. They are undefeated. They'd gotten some chatter for making the college football playoff. On paper, it would appear the Bearcats are better than the teams that Georgia's been beating as of late, the South Carolinas and the Mississippi States, the Missouris, teams like that. How important do you think it is for Georgia to kind of go out and play well against Cincinnati to validate what seems like improvement over the course of the last 3 regular season games, although against competition that we don't quite think of as being equal to Georgia? How important does that make the Peach Bowl on Friday to you?
I think one thing that made this game even much more important is the game last night against Florida, Oklahoma. I don't think the Georgia players want to go out in that fashion. Florida just really got demolished in that game, and I think the Georgia players now see if you don't go out and play, you're going to get beat by a team that you don't expect to beat you. And I don't think the Georgia seniors would like to go out that way. I think the Georgia seniors are going to be motivated because they're going to actually get a senior day. So I think they have a lot of motivations to go and play this meaningless game. But it's a game. If you're there, if you were playing, if you're on that field, show up and play.
One of the hot topics, you bring this up, so I'll ask you about it. And obviously, as a mentor and advocate of players now and a former player yourself, your opinion on this really matters. The subject of opt-outs has been controversial. There are a lot around college football. Georgia's not immune to this, but Georgia's by far from the only program who's kind of dealing with this. And Terrence, you understand the debate that goes on from certain people who want to say, hey, you've got a commitment to this team. You need to be there for your teammates. Other people say something to the effect of, at a certain point, you've got to do what's best for you, which is maybe not put yourself in harm's way ahead of what could be a future in the NFL. It's a contentious debate, and I kind of understand both sides of it, to be honest with you. As a former player yourself and someone who still works with a lot of players right now, what do you think of the current opt-out trend when it comes to college football?
First and foremost, I understand the reasoning that a lot of the guys opt out for the bowl game. I understand it. Andrew Thomas, who I know personally last year, he has the opportunity to be the 4th pick in the draft and have an opportunity to take care of his family for generations to come. So if fans don't understand that, then it's very, very selfish and worrying about a game. I understand it. Me personally, I would play. I mean, I love football that much that I would go out there and play and let chips fall where they're made. But to be called quitters and all that when a guy like Andrew Thomas has the opportunity of a lifetime, these opportunities do not come very often. Jalen Smith of Notre Dame was going to be a top 5 pick. He tore his ACL in that bowl game, dropped to the 2nd round. And Dallas just did it because they saw and their doctors believed that he would be able to come back and play at the level that he's playing at right now. But no fans are going to make a GoFundMe account and help that player recoup the money that he lost playing in this bowl game. But again, I would play. That's just who I am, what I would do, I would play. But I understand the players, especially when you're a top draft pick, and even if you're going to be a low-round draft pick, this is an opportunity that we have dreamed about all our lives. And I understand them, but I personally would play.
Do you think it's different if you're not Andrew Thomas? As you said, Thomas was a top 4 pick. That's generational wealth. That's robber baron type money that he has a chance, to make. For someone whose draft status is not quite as secure and not as obvious of a sure fire first round pick, are those players, decisions to opt out, is that more, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, is that more worthy of criticism if you're not a surefire first-round pick, or is it as simple as saying everybody just needs to do what they think is best for them?
I think everyone is going to do what's best for them, because I always equate to you working your job. In this generation, people are always looking for the next best thing, and that's what's doing best for you and your family. So why is it different than these players who dreamt about having an opportunity to be drafted, play in the NFL? Why is it such different for athletes in normal life situation where you're looking for another job, or you're leaving your job because you got a better job offer somewhere else? Are you quitting on that job? So I just wouldn't call them quitters. I think that's too harsh of a word to call them quitters when this is what they're prepared for all their lives. I mean, I heard people say they need to give the scholarship money back. Do you understand how much money that these players generate every Saturday for this university? So it doesn't matter if you're Andrew Thomas or a guy that's probably going to be a late-round draft pick. This is something he has to do for him. Again, I would play, but I understand the reason that a lot of players aren't playing anymore.
I want to ask you something else with the Peach Bowl here in a moment. It's Terrence Edwards, the former Georgia wide receiver. He's a part of our program here today. He's also going to be with us tomorrow afternoon for the DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. And what a great ride it's been for us with the bookstore all year long. It's our 5th year of being with our friends there at the UGA bookstore. Home games in Athens. There weren't quite as many of those this year as we'd have liked. But certainly I love being decked out in UGA bookstore apparel all the time, whether it be the Nike Vineyard Vines, the Peter Millar, the Southern Tide. A lot of you got Christmas gifts you may not really want. You got to take that back and get some money. Let me tell you what to do with the money that you got back for the Christmas gift you just returned. Take that over to the UGA bookstore and get yourself some great-looking UGA apparel, whether it's the Nike coaches gear or anything else. It's all available for you. It's the great selection of UGA apparel right there at the UGA bookstore. Now, if you can't get to Athens right now, the good news is you can shop 24 hours a day, any day you want, online at UGAbookstore.com. I love my friends, Howard and the whole team there at the UGA bookstore. They do a great job, and I am very, very thankful to have had them with us all year long, including tomorrow for our season finale of the DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. Terrence, in the little bit of time we have left, let me just ask you this question real quick. Obviously, we know that the Georgia players are not going to say anything about not respecting Cincinnati. We did hear some of that from Florida going to the Oklahoma game, which is obviously ludicrous in retrospect. But the Georgia players just don't talk that way. The Georgia coaches don't talk that way, and they, I think, instill that attitude in the players themselves. But let's be honest, behind closed doors, sometimes what you think and say is a little bit different than maybe what you sort of project publicly. So how do you get the Georgia players to take Cincinnati seriously and not allow the temptation of viewing this as less than an SEC team? How do you make sure that they don't do that privately? We know they'll avoid that publicly, but how do you make sure they actually take it seriously privately?
The game from last night, that's the biggest motivating factor to me that you can convey to the players. You saw Florida went in with the attitude of we're the SEC, with the big bad Kings on the block, we're the SEC East champs who played Bama in the SEC championship game, and they had quotes. So if you go into the game thinking Cincinnati is not a worthy opponent, last night is going to happen to us tomorrow night if you don't go in there and respect your opponent. You may think because Cincinnati is not one of the Group 5 or Power 5 teams that they don't play good football. They're undefeated for a reason. Texas, a couple years ago, we went in with the attitude, we're Georgia, and they beat us. I think they came back with a better attitude against Baylor. So Richard LeCount and that group really has to go and keep this team focused on let's not get embarrassed like Florida got embarrassed last night, because that is a bad taste going into the offseason.
That is a great, great perspective and a great way to end our conversation. Terrence, thanks for being with us here today. I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow on a Friday for a Georgia game after the Peach Bowl tomorrow for our DawgNation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. I certainly appreciate your time, and I'll look forward to talking to you then.
Thanks, B.A. See you tomorrow.
Good stuff there from Terrence Edwards.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, really good stuff there from Terrence Edwards. Incredible perspective on a number of fronts. And listen, when it comes to somewhat controversial topics, like one of the things that we're going to do around here is I've obviously got my opinion, but I've never wanted my opinion to be the only opinion that's ever expressed on DawgNation Daily. Now, listen, I'm like anybody else. I believe my opinions are right. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them. But I'm not one of these hopefully, narcissists that goes around and only is interested in hearing things that validate my own point of view or amplify my own point of view. So we're going to bring on people who think one way. We're going to bring on people who think another way. We're going to be a very big tent and try to hear from a lot of different kinds of voices so that we can get every perspective that is found within DawgNation, hopefully on the airwaves here. And that's why I'm really glad to have guys like Terrence Edwards who do a great job of laying it all down, and he did a good job right there for sure. Classic City Lager, let me tell you about that. First of all, DawgNation Happy Hour. We did pre-record this, I'm not going to lie. It was obviously in honor of New Year's Eve. I really don't have much in the way of New Year's Eve plans, but we still pre-recorded the show nonetheless. That'll be at 4 p.m. today, and for you, if you're getting ready to have some fun with friends or obviously trying to stay socially distant, that is certainly a serious thing right now. But one way or another, you find a way to enjoy yourself. Maybe it's just the comfort of your own home with your significant other. Either way, Classic City Lager goes great with that. It's a Athens original from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a lager-style beer, but it's a craft-style lager. That means there's great flavor. This is a very, very well-made, intricate beer with a lot of different flavor notes. Unbelievable stuff. Wherever you shop, wherever you get your groceries, you can get yourself some Classic City Lager. In 12 packs cans, 6-pack cans. It's from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It is good, cold beer. Let me give you a couple of thoughts here, more on the Cotton Bowl. And this is more, I guess, serious football type evaluation than it is, anything related to, mocking Dan Mullen, which I'm certainly reserve the right to do some more in the future. But there are two things from a football standpoint that I think is pretty interesting about last night's game. The first thing is this, and I'm not the only one to say this, that when you see Heisman finalist Kyle Trask playing without most of the receivers that he had been throwing to all year long, you see a version of Trask that was nowhere near as good as he had been for most of the year. And obviously some people make the comparison to maybe what Jake Fromm dealt with in 2019 when he was also hamstrung by a group of receivers that wasn't quite as maybe explosive as what he'd had in 2018. But the point is just more than just a Georgia-Florida comparison. It's kind of a large big picture deal. We've talked about the statistical guys, those math guys, those stat guys that talk about returning production at receiver being as important as it is at quarterback. I think it's time for us to start taking that very, very seriously, that there's no individual receiver, with apologies maybe to Devontae Smith, but no individual receiver that's as important as quarterback. But the position group overall, given the fact that most teams use 3, 4, 5, 6 receivers regularly, that the position group itself is as important as the quarterback position. And I think that last night's an example of that. I don't think it excuses away the Florida loss, certainly not the blowout loss. We'll get to the defense part of this in a moment. But when you see Florida playing so poorly without many of the receivers that have become household names this year, I think that does strongly indicate to us just how much of an important thing experienced talent, capable receivers are. That's something to think about going to the offseason. And by the way, on paper for Georgia, this receiving core is as good going into the start of the season, as experienced based on who we think is coming back, as talented as any Georgia team in quite some time. But last night I do think is an indication that the strength of your receiving room is as important as anything when it comes to making an evaluation about how good a football team is. Equal to quarterback, I would say, even when it comes to a Heisman finalist like what Trask was. Here's the other thing. We've said this a million times. Oklahoma last night, what they do offensively against Florida is a reminder that high-powered passing attacks are really important. Spencer Rattler threw 3 touchdowns last night. But to be able to also run the football is the kind of thing that takes an offense from being dangerous to making it now deadly. That's when you can add the running game component to the high-powered passing attack, at that point in time, that's how you become unstoppable. And everybody knows what Oklahoma did on the ground last night, 435 yards rushing. For those of you who've been with us on this show for a number of years, you can go back and remember leading into that Rose Bowl game against Oklahoma back then. great respect for Baker Mayfield. We obviously had that. We knew what Lincoln Riley's offense was capable of doing, but we were, I don't want to say petrified. That's too strong of a word. We definitely, though, had a healthy dose of respect for, at the time, it was Rodney Anderson and Trey Sermon, who's at Ohio State now, but we had healthy respect for what those Oklahoma running backs could do. We said on this show over and over again that you could not give up rushing yards to Oklahoma. And in the first half of that Rose Bowl game, Georgia almost got knocked out of the game, and the Anderson-Sermon rushing yards were a big reason why. That stabilized itself in the second half. But for the Georgia fan who is in the hopes of watching his team or her team upgrade the passing attack, and that's critically important. You can't win the biggest and best games if you don't have that high-powered passing attack, but you've also got to have the other component to go with it. You've got to have Oklahoma's ability to rush for 400 yards, what they did last night, or what Najee Harris has done for Alabama all season long. Look at Florida, who was good enough on its best days to beat good teams. They did beat Georgia, but if you want to know what separates Florida from the true national championship contenders, guys like Dameon Pierce could just not give Florida that component rushing attack to go along with the passing attack. That Cotton Bowl last night, I think, in addition to being just entertaining because it was Florida getting beaten up, has a lot of interesting insight into the way that college football is evolving and some of the ways in which college football isn't quite evolving as well. I'll also say maybe the last game for Todd Grantham and what a game it was if that was indeed the case. There was a couple other things I was going to do SEC through wise here. Let me just do this real quick because I want to talk about JT Daniels here for a moment. Bowl games today, you got 3. Got another SEC team playing. It's the Armed Forces Bowl. That one's also in Texas, in Fort Worth, with Mississippi State and Tulsa. So SEC team today, but obviously everybody's turning their attention to what's going to happen on Friday. The lead-in is Georgia-Cincinnati for the Peach Bowl, and then you move into the college football playoff after that. I'll just give you a very succinct opinion on both these games. I don't think there's anything that Notre Dame can do to stay close with Alabama at all. I know that's kind of a simp opinion, but sometimes it is truly simple, and I just think that Alabama just walks all over Notre Dame. We've seen the Irish in this spot before, and it's never different. It's always the same, and this will be as bad as the Crimson Tide wants it to be. I do think Ohio State can and will keep it close with Clemson. Ultimately, Clemson may very well win the game, but let's don't get something confused when it comes to Ohio State. Many of us have pointed out what might be an undeserving resume for the college football playoff, given how few games that Ohio State played and the fact that they didn't really play their best against the best teams they played, Northwestern, Indiana, as a for instance there. But this is still a team that's capable on individual day basis of putting a big game together because of the talent on the roster, not the least of which quarterback Justin Fields. So let's not confuse undeserving with incapable. Ohio State's more than capable of giving it a go against Clemson. In fact, last year, better Buckeyes team, but last year they did just that. So I believe the Sugar Bowl between Ohio State and Clemson will be close. I believe the Rose Bowl in Texas between Alabama and Notre Dame will be a total blowout. By the way, keep your eye on this. There's also bad weather expected in New Orleans over the course of the next couple of days. We'll see how that potentially impacts the travel for the teams looking to arrive there. That's worth paying attention to. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, we'll make that your SEC through. Now let's turn our attention back fully to the Georgia Bulldogs for a moment, and we'll do what we do every week at this time. It's our Kroger Fresh Take. Of course, Kroger is fresh for everyone, and our Fresh Take here today focuses in on Georgia quarterback JT Daniels, what he did and didn't say when he met with reporters earlier this week. Obviously, one of the big storylines for Georgia in the early going of the offseason is Daniels and his decision to return to UGA for another year or go on to the NFL draft. I do truly believe that Daniels is coming back. I'll be surprised if he doesn't. But when he was asked about that this week, he did kind of sidestep the question, as most guys do when facing these kinds of questions this time of year. Let me let you hear what Daniels said.
Yeah, it's not, something I've honestly given too much thought to. This year's going by fast, and I'm focused week to week. South Carolina, I was focused on South Carolina. Missouri, I was focused on Missouri. Vandy, I was focused on Vandy until that was no more, and then since then, I haven't gone home since I've been in Georgia. I've been here. I was here through Christmas, here through Thanksgiving, and I've been here getting ready for the bowl. Since that Vandy week was over, so I really haven't given too much thought to anything. This week is Cincinnati, and then once the offseason comes, I'll be thinking about the offseason.
What a weird year it's been for Daniels, essentially choosing Georgia without visiting Georgia, having been here, not being at home. I'm imagining, somewhat limited contact with your family because of that. It's been really interesting to be at the games this year and see the barrier that exists in many cases between the players and their family. Used to be for dog walks, things like that. You got a lot of hugs and kisses and things of that nature. Some of the stadiums I've been to this year, the family couldn't get close at all. And, in most cases, there was still a good bit of separation between the players and their families there leading into a game. Strange year for a guy like JT, coming over from California. And I'm sure he does want to get with his family on this a little bit. I don't believe that he hasn't thought about this at all, but it's his prerogative not to say anything about that right now. However, the more interesting statement from Daniels going back this past week was not what he didn't say about his future NFL status, but what he did say about what he's seen from Georgia here at the end of the season. We've all noticed the momentum. I think it's been fun for a lot of us to watch. Daniels himself also believes, apparently, that it's real, and this makes you feel good if you're a UGA fan. He is seemingly enjoying it as much as all of us are. He was asked, are you kind of sad the season's coming to an end given the way the team is playing right now? And I love JT's answer on this. Take a listen.
I do feel like we've been really hot, as of lately. I think a lot of young guys have matured, tremendously, from George to Jermaine to Big Warren on the line. There's a lot of guys that have gotten a lot better, and I think you're seeing what that's looking like now, obviously a little later than we would have hoped. I'd love to play with this team forever. It's an amazing team. I think there's great central leadership. There's a lot of great things with this team.
Listen, I think the potential for Daniels at Georgia is obviously off the charts, not just because of his ability, although that ability is certainly prodigious, but his attitude as well, his insight, his comfort in just talking about the things that are happening on the football field. I think he's a very interesting character, and obviously as a fan, selfishly, I really want to see more of him in a Georgia uniform, and I will always be left to wonder what if he could have played just a little bit more this year. But ultimately, that's probably water under the bridge. What matters is the future, and I get the indication that Daniels is still a part of Georgia's immediate future, even though he hasn't quite confirmed that himself. But boy, hopes are high that he chooses to do indeed that, because the sky's the limit for what the Dogs could be able to do next season with him. That's our Kroger Fresh Take. It's brought to you by our friends at Kroger. And of course, you can get toasty with Kroger as we head towards New Year's Eve here tonight. Kroger's got everything you need, from the platters, the beer, the champagne, the containers for putting up your holiday decorations, everything. You can use the Kroger Pickup, which is free right now, free pickup during this busy month. So you can check that out with our friends at Kroger. Just stop by and shop yourself or take advantage of that Kroger Pickup. A really good resource. I know my family's been using Kroger Pickup a lot lately, and boy, it has just really been a godsend for us as of late. So huge thanks to our friends at Kroger for all of that. By the way, speaking of the new year, I want to just say a happy new year to all of you, and I know that I will be far from the only one to say that there's hopes for greater happiness in 2021. It has just been a really hard year in 2020, and there has been a lot of sadness. I've not been immune from that. You all know that. I've heard from many of you who have also not been immune to the sadness that this year has brought so many. And I just take it as a great sign that through it all, we've tried to be here for each other. Through it all, we've tried to enjoy what we're capable of enjoying and really honoring our community by how we continue to try to strive forward. And obviously, there are more challenges to come in 2021, but let's take some time to express some gratitude from me for each of you, and hopes for a great year to come. By the way, Eddie's coming back on Monday. That'll at least be fun. We'll see you then. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. A little long there at the end, but we appreciate all of you being with the show. We got to rock and roll here a little bit today, so I know I say this and sometimes don't follow through. Comments will be quick today because we've got a busy broadcast day around the world of Dog Nation. So we'll look forward to doing all of that, and of course giving you a chance to weigh in a bit here as well with the game coming up tomorrow. I should say this schedule-wise for us. So tomorrow is not a regular DawgNation Daily. We'll probably come on the air pretty close to 10, so it may not seem that different, but tomorrow won't be full-on DawgNation Daily. You know, normally Jeff Sintel joins us on Friday. That won't happen tomorrow. We'll be in kind of pregame mode. I don't know that I'll be able to show you the dog walk. I don't know that I'll be able to get it's not even really a dog walk, but the players enter Mercedes-Benz Stadium from inside the stadium. I don't know that I can get close enough to video that. I'm going to try to. I just don't know that I can. So we're going to try to do the best we can with all of that. And one way or another, I will be with you on video tomorrow, though, to preview the Peach Bowl with Georgia and Cincinnati. And then, of course, after the game, as I said, with my buddy Terrence Edwards for the DawgNation post-game show presented by the UGA bookstore. So I'm certainly looking forward to all of that. Isaac Cruz laughs at the notion that the comment section will be quick today. It really does have to be today. Pete Williams mentioning James Cook's father passing away. Yeah, I mentioned that on the show we did yesterday. I should have definitely mentioned that here today. It's kind of a shame that I didn't, to be honest with you. That's a mess up on my part. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed that I didn't do that. William Hasty on the subject of excuses if Georgia loses to Cincinnati. Yeah, I don't know that you'll get much of that in the way of Georgia there on that front. I don't know that you will. I don't know that you will. Let's see what else is going on. Epic Robinson, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Anakemi Yudoko says the next top prospect for UGA. Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the interesting things that you see start to unfold here with the 2022 class of of some of the the top guys. Jeff Sintel certainly unveiling some of that right now for us on Before the Hedges. The young man from Jefferson, I know, factors very high on that list. Watching some of that 2022 stuff unfold is going to be very, very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. Let's see what else is going on here. Let me go over to YouTube for a second. Over here on the DawgNation YouTube page, just for a moment, for some of our R.S. Andrews cool-down comments. Hunter Davis also saying, hey, let's not forget there's still a big prospect out there for the class of 2021 when it comes to Terry and Arnold. Yeah, no doubt about that. No doubt about that. DMart42 says, where is Erickson lining up tomorrow? I'm assuming that Erickson will probably play center. He says, who is the guard if he's at center? Yeah, that'll be worth watching. That'll be worth watching to see. Enrique Murillo, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Jerry Dogfan says, you have a great chance to bring back Eddie today. Yeah, we're going to save him for the start of the new year. I did consider the possibility we might not do that, but we're going to save him for the start of the new year for sure. Ace Dog has to go back to work on Monday. He says, last live show for a while. I know many of you are able to join us during the holiday season live when you're not able to do that during the regular year. So for a lot of you who are kind of getting back to work as the new year begins next week, new week starts, we certainly appreciate you checking us in live here for these last few days. And we'll look forward to being with you whenever we can in your phone, pocket, whether you're driving, working out, whatever you're doing. So Ace, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Jeremy Harbin calls it 49-17 for Georgia over Cincinnati. Stephen Wainwright looking for Cedric Von Prawn. Yeah, that should be a good one to see, him getting his chance. Hunter Davis says, who is Eddie? So for those of you who don't know, Eddie is the unofficial mascot for DawgNation Daily. Can we see a picture of Eddie, Michael, since you're sitting right there? This is what Eddie looks like. So for those of you who are not regulars to the show, that is Eddie. And Eddie does return on Monday. Gator Hater Strikes Back. We're calling it a brand new Gator Hater era begins on Monday. Looking forward to that. Brandon Griffin says Kirby will have his team ready to play. I do agree that. He says if we lose, you won't hear excuses. I agree with that there as well. You certainly won't hear it from those here. We haven't really done that kind of stuff. And there was some fodder for doing that after the Florida game. You could have mentioned the injuries that Georgia had. You could have mentioned the upended schedule that probably benefited Florida more so than it benefited Georgia because it happened at Florida's, because of a situation that was taking place at Florida. But as I jokingly said during the regular show, what I tell my kids is you get what you get. You don't pitch fit. You play the cards that you're dealt. And I think Georgia did that in a dignified way this year. And I would expect nothing less if the game doesn't go the way that it's supposed to on Friday. Because here's the thing. I expect Georgia to win, and my guess is that Georgia probably exceeds expectations in the game. But wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if Cincinnati played well enough to win this game. Cincinnati's a pretty good team. This is one of the better teams that Georgia's played this year. Georgia has to play a good game to win it. So this is not, it's hard to even make the comparison because it was so long ago, but I'm not sure that Hawaii team in 2007 was ever very good. It just happened to be undefeated. By comparison, this Cincinnati team's probably better than that, at least, I would say. Let me go back over to Facebook here just for a moment. John William Adams asking about the black. Yeah, Georgia will wear the black jerseys for the game, and they did wear them in the 2007 bowl game, or at least the bowl game at the end of the 2007 season against Florida. Pete Williams says, I didn't realize how much I missed Eddie. I appreciate that, Pete. Thank you very much. Travis McCullough says, can't wait for the Gator Hater Updater to return next season. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. Steve Highland's got the Dogs 53, the Bear Kittens, as he calls them, 21. He says, mark the tape. Boy, that'd be fun to see. John William Adams, the black jerseys in a bowl game were last worn against Hawaii. I don't think they've won in a bowl game since then. Pretty sure I'm right about that. Adam Brooks says this will be the best defense JT Daniels has faced. I believe that's true. Austin Kilby says, I'm worried about our secondary, but they did struggle against Tulsa, meaning Cincinnati. Yeah, it was not an easy win, and Tulsa's probably a better team than some people give them credit for. Clinton Thrift says, any chance that Beck has taken the number 2 spot from Stetson? We should find that out before the game tomorrow. I haven't heard much chatter about that one way or another. I think it's been a little quiet on the Carson Beck front. And I'm not quite sure what that means necessarily. Here's what my pitch to Carson Beck would be, though, if I was Georgia. I would tell him to look at Kyle Trask and to look at Mac Jones. These were guys who were very patient, and their patience was eventually rewarded. And I'm not going to tell you that if Beck sticks around at Georgia, he'll eventually have a record-setting season the way that both those guys did. But it is certainly a possibility that Trask waited and finally got his chance. Mac Jones waited, finally got his chance at Alabama. In the case of Jones, you can make the case this was just not supposed to happen. He was supposed to be the other quarterback in the year that included Tua Tagovailoa, the signing class of 2017. That's what he was supposed to be, and as it turns out, Jones' credentials at Alabama are going to be just as high as Tua's are. Certainly with the way they have a chance to finish that season, that sometimes patience can be rewarded. And by the way, if I was a dad of a son who was a quarterback, I think I would try to tell my son that there as well, that when you think about the quarterbacks that transfer, sometimes you see guys going to have great success, but there are a lot of guys you see transfer and who really knows what happens to them. I mean, Jake Bentley going to Utah. Now, some of that's related to the coronavirus, but you kind of go out there and kind of get lost a little bit. Blake Barnett goes to, I think, Arizona State. That's former 5-star signing at Alabama. Was he really, happy with the way that things worked out? Sometimes it's easy to say escaping from this program and just going to this other program will be a controllable outcome, and I can, have success from doing that. But things in life aren't always quite that simple. That sometimes your best chance at eventually getting some success might be to be patient. So you better believe if I was Buster Faulkner or Todd Monken or even Kirby Smart, that's what I'd be saying to someone like Carson Beck right now, or future versions of the same kind of player in future signing classes. That, hey, I know you're having to wait for what you want, and as one of our commenters mentioned, as it stands right now, Beck's not even presumably the number 2 quarterback at Georgia. But if you'll stay patient, eventually your chance may come, like it did for guys who were also at one point in time buried on depth charts, guys like Trask and guys like Mac Jones. That's what my pitch would be. All right, let's see. Matt Rukavina says, consider this. About 9 months ago, we were doing shows from my house, not knowing when would be back to normal. What a year it's been. Yeah, Matt, it has been a crazy, crazy year for sure. A crazy, crazy year for sure. And Anakimi Yodoku on the subject of Sarkisian's contract. Yeah, I believe that he may be due to make about $3 million next year. Adam Brooks says Sark is the head coach in waiting in Alabama. Maybe he is. Isaac Cruz says, I still haven't given a prediction yet. Let me do this. How about Georgia somewhere in the neighborhood of 31-17, something along those lines. 31-17 maybe for Georgia over Cincinnati. That's about where I am on this. Randy Hall asking about Walter Grant. I have to admit, I'm not quite sure what Grant's status is of right now. Not quite sure about that. Tenio Calvino reminding you to eat those collard greens and black-eyed peas heading towards tomorrow. Yeah, it's the collard greens for money and the black-eyed peas for good health. Is that right? Maybe a double dose of both of those for me. Robert Reynolds said, did we clown Florida today? Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Gary Westmiller says, do you think that recruits might start opting out of the state finals? Well, in the case of someone like Brock Vandegrift, that was the last thing on his mind because – I mean, one of the things he talked about over and over again was the joy that he had about trying to win the championship with his father there. So most of these guys are competitors, and they're just not looking to doing that. Nathan Edwards says, which young guy I'm most excited to see play tomorrow? I agree with some of the chatter that's been around Darnell Washington as of late. I'm curious to see that Georgia, who did try to get him the ball more against Missouri, are they able to continue that against Cincinnati? I'm really looking forward to that. The position group I'm most interested in is that new look offensive line with no Trey Hill, with no Ben Cleveland at least. How does that group kind of come together for the game? That's the position group I'm the most interested in. And young player-wise, I'm pretty interested to see what Darnell does in the game. All right, we are going to go. DMart42 says, did I know about Vandegrift's PCL? No, I did not know that. People close to Vandegrift did, but I'm not close enough to that situation to have known that. I mean, honestly, even after becoming aware of it, watching him play in the game, he looked fairly healthy. I mean, I know it's come out that he's not having the surgery. Listen, I'm no doctor, but I guess that probably makes sense to me that why not just leave well enough alone? I mean, it's not like he wasn't able to play on it, so maybe with rest, he'll be ready to go for the spring practices, which, listen, knock on, I don't have any wood around me, but knock on some wood, there's kind of a normal spring practice type schedule this year. I know that Vandegrift very much wants to be a part of that, and that seems to be the best medical advice. Yeah, Jay Shipes, he did win state championship for Prince Avenue Christian. Adam Gibbons says it hasn't been very quick with the comments. Yeah. D-Mart says he wasn't asking if I knew about it, but if Kirby and UGA knew about it. I'm sure they probably did know about it. I'm sure they probably did. And I don't guess there's any – they can have – now Kirby can't have – I guess he's limited in the contact he can have. But in terms of medical evaluations and things like that, I'm sure there's been some back channel conversations around that for a while. Green Soldier says that he was a part of a team that beat Prince Avenue Christian back when Mark Rick's kid played there. That's a good win, Green Soldier. Very good win. He says they're a new level of good now, though. Yeah, that's a good team right now. Cliff Payne says he missed seeing Ugg on the sidelines. I would agree with that. All right, y'all. Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. Thanks for, just as folks have mentioned, just kind of riding the weird wave that has been 2020. And we will look forward to putting a cap on this year tonight and then starting a brand new year tomorrow, which what we hope is a big bowl win for Georgia against Cincinnati. It should be a lot of fun to watch unfold. Thank you so much for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Huge thanks to R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews for all of that. They'll get your heating system back to factory fresh specs. If you're worried about that as we head towards the winter, they'll give you the peace of mind you deserve when you check out rsandrews.com. Happy New Year. I'll see you tomorrow for the Kroger kickoff and then the DawgNation post-game show presented by the UGA bookstore. And then back here again on Monday for the start of a brand new year with Eddie back on the desk for DawgNation Daily presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you then, everybody.